All right, welcome back. Now, the 2023 presidential election in Nigeria is less than 3 months away, and a string of pre-election posters has been projecting who the likely winners of the election will be. For instance, while the ANAP-NY poll has projected that the Labour Party candidate Peter Obi is going to be the likely winner of the election, another poll by this day newspaper is projecting Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party as the likely winner. As expected, the polls have been sharply criticized and rejected by other major parties, accusing the organizers as partisan and skewing the polls to favor their candidates. What has come into focus now is the methodology adopted for the polls and how representative the respondents are. And then there's the big question: can the outcome of polling be relied upon to determine the likely winner of an election in Nigeria? Just how accurate are they? In an opinion piece he penned recently, a former Director General of Nigeria Broadcasting Commission, Danladi Bako, said the recent polls did not reflect the diversity in the demographics of age, gender, occupation, etc. of the respondents, adding that the ANAP-NY polls, for instance, did not define the sampling of 92 million registered voters spread across the country and how they were targeted. Let's discuss this further now. Richard Adeyinka is the CEO and founder of Data Home Research and Communications Limited. He is which of course is a research firm based in Lagos. He's been a research consultant as well as data analyst for around 15 years. Also joining us is Manji Wilson, who is the project manager for Lead Beyond. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. Let me start with you, Manji. What do you make of these polls? How reliable are they?
Thank you, DEJI, for having me over. Globally, polling has become one of the most consistent means of projecting not just, of course, electoral, outcomes, but ascertaining key, issues that have to deal with human, development. Of course, for Nigeria at the moment, elections is on the front burner. And when we talk about the reliability of polling, I think, as we all know, data, numbers don't lie. However, of course, methodology and statistical analysis, tools that have been deployed make use of certain parameters to be able to draw conclusions when it comes to such, polling. Now, this is an opinion poll, which is conducted well ahead of the election. The parameters that were utilized to arrive at these conclusions, are all there. What I would say is that polls are always a projection. They are always indicative and may not eventually become the final outcome of a process. What it normally does is that it shapes the direction for elections. And I think what all the interested parties, all stakeholders need to be looking at the moment is, what do we need to do to shift the direction that these polls are sort of tilting towards? Yes, the sample size for the polling may be looking at 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 because it was done sequentially. But it's also important for you to ascertain what this indication means to you, either as a political party or as an interested party, talking about election observation groups, civil society, and the citizens as a whole. But this is a very important means of engaging, citizens towards, ensuring that the process is inclusive and one that also fits, into their demands as well.
Well, Richard, let me come to you. Manji just said, look, numbers don't lie, but the problem is when the process through which those numbers are gotten, especially the methodology deployed, when that process is faulty or somewhat, then it will be difficult to say numbers don't lie, because the numbers, if the methodology is not right, of course the numbers will definitely not be reflective.
Yeah, you are right. Once the methodology is wrong, the numbers will tell a different story. If you look at what Anand just put out there, I will pick just one as to buttress this point, that somehow, yes, numbers don't lie, but when they are not properly collected, they can tell a different story. Look at the data collected in Southwest, where you have over about 60%, that is 60 in 10 voters, either refused or has not decided who to vote for. And then someone will come out to report that someone will be first, second, or third, where you have 60% undecided or who refuse to tell you who they are voting for. So the reportage is wrong, the collection process is wrong. So this number don't tell lies, but at the same time, this one is telling us what is not, what will likely not be. In terms of methodology, there are many instruments that we use to determine the validity and reliability of survey, of polls. For instance, you are talking about, and this is global, if you watch CNN opinion poll reports, you will see that at the end of that result, they will say plus or minus either 5, 4, or 6. You will always see it. They will always report it. That is confidence interval. What is the highest a candidate can go in this region or in this in our nation, and what is the lowest it can go? So when you reduce it, if you give someone 20%, for instance, and the confidence interval is 7%, that means the person can actually go lower to 13%, while the other candidate you have reported 16 or 17 for can go as high as 25%. That is confidence interval. So it is not only just conduct, you have to ensure that you report confidence level, error margin, confidence interval. All of these things must be reported. If we put what Annan has done, yes, he has the foundation has a good intention to do it, but the methodology is wrong, the reportage is wrong, and it cannot withstand the rigor of research, scientific research.
And of course, what we're gathering is that the data was gathered through, I mean, the respondents were spoken to through phone calls.
That makes it even worse anyway.
But isn't phone calls a valid means of
no,
generating data in a research?
No, see, in research, in poll, one of the things that also determines the validity is the sampling technique. We have two types of sampling techniques. We have probability sampling techniques, and we have non-probability sampling techniques. Once you sample your respondent through non-probability process, you cannot generalize it, at most within where you have conducted it. So we can't generalize it. Any poll that is not based on the laws of probability, that is probability sampling technique. You can use multi-stage sampling, systematic sampling with a random start, which online poll or mail poll, one of their deficiencies, they cannot give you the adequacy of it. They cannot ensure that the respondent are selected in accordance with the laws of probability. So you are just doing what you like, and when you come up with that, yes, numbers don't lie. However, you cannot generalize such survey.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Manji, you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I hear Adeyinka, and I, of course, respect his, ideas and opinions on, the survey. I wouldn't disregard, again, the opinion survey conducted by ANAP, together with NOI, and say it doesn't really matter. What I would say, of course, is to look at a way of ensuring that the subsequent polls, since this is the second that is being conducted from the 1st in September, take care of some of the other elements that are most likely going to influence, the decision of these respondents. So how about, issues that may not be easily, discussed when you are, having these phone calls? Because, of course, one key element, again, for respondents has to be anonymity. So if you ask, and you place phone calls to respondents, and they probably feel, okay, my detail is out there, probably my choice may now influence certain, actions. They may not likely be completely open. However, there are other key issues. Of course, what are the socioeconomic, configurations, of these respondents, what are some of the elements that impacts on them, across board. We know that this poll was sampled across the 6 geopolitical zones. However, what about the rural and the urban, disaggregation when it comes to the respondents? Most of the respondents, from the urbanized centers, because when you go for a lot of online, opinion surveys, people tend to feel that the group or the class that responds to that, are those that are not, in terms of their numbers, their high numbers out there in the rural communities, sort of overshadow, those in the rural communities. And for online surveys, to a large extent, you have, respondents from even outside the shores of this country, though Nigerians, but we also know that by the electoral law are unable to exercise their franchise when it comes to elections, except they are able to, come in, physically. So I wouldn't disregard that. I know that there are lots of elections. I was recently in Kenya where I followed the elections through. And I know that the candidate that led that process online, who won, came, a distant fourth at the end of, the elections. So that was why I mentioned earlier that it doesn't mean that these numbers, are not reflective of the thoughts, of these respondents. What it means is that every stakeholder will need, to look at these polls. Why are the respondents, raising, their or sharing their thoughts coming from this angle? What are the issues that are affecting them? How can we work towards ensuring that the numbers, change, the next time these polls are conducted? Even if they do not change, how can we ensure, that on ground, our work, is reflective of shaping the perception, of these voters? Globally, these numbers, once these polls are conducted, at the end, it eventually leads to the outcomes. And you can see even for the NOI polls in previous elections, you may look at the statistical, sample as not being sufficient enough. However, they are quite significant. In fact, I know that most political parties on their own usually conduct, such polling, and if they are able to do that, what stops them? While you have these organizations that are conducting independent polling, you can go out there. I have seen a lot of, faithfuls on this from these political parties on Twitter or some other, social media conduct their own polls. And sometimes the moment they receive an indication that goes in the opposite direction, I realize that some of them have pulled down, some of these, polls saying that it's not totally reflective. But you cannot discard, because I think people are getting much more sensitized. The electorates are getting also sophisticated, just like, the political class and players in this field.
And let's quickly talk about the sophistication of the electorate, because it's very important here. The former NBC DG now, alluded to that in an opinion piece he put out there that, look, sometimes you just have to be careful with these polls, because sometimes you put out a result of, a result, and when reality hits and, it doesn't go the way it's reported in the polls, there's the chance that the supporters of a particular candidate who probably led in the poll and during the election proper lost, that there is the chance that they could resort to violence, especially in a society like Nigeria, where, of course, you're quite right, the electorate is getting, sophisticated by the day, but we're still not there, especially when you compare this country now to countries in the West. So I'm just wondering, is there a danger to, is there a downside to this polling as well, that, look, if at the end of the day what is forecast does not happen, is there a chance that some of these supporters may feel the process had not been transparent and they may just resort to violence?
Yes, certainly. That is the risk, attached to, of course, public, opinion polls like this. Like I mentioned to you, I followed the Kenya election. I was there for about a year. And with that projections, you realize that, a lot of the electorates felt disenfranchised, because they felt, all the indications have shown that our candidate was in the lead. And eventually, when electoral outcomes were pronounced, they realized that they had not emerged, victorious. And this is why, the word of caution. And I had mentioned earlier that when such opinion polls, are released, there is the need for every player to take it seriously. Even the candidate that is being projected to win, for that election needs to look at it, because you can see that over 33% from the initial, polls were undecided. And as Adeyinka has mentioned, we have quite a huge percentage from some of these regions that have not also responded, to the polls, apart from those that declined, when they were reached out to. So you can see that there are quite the number of those that are undecided in terms of the polls, are sufficient enough to overturn the current reality in terms of the percentages that each of these candidates have scored. So I would say that every follower, every faithful of each of these candidates would need to look at this. What do we need to do to reinforce our support base, whether online or in the grassroots communities? What is the work that this calls for strategy now. So rather than disregard or begin to throw banters between one political party or another, discrediting such polls, I think every major stakeholder, every political party and actor needs to go back and look at this, their strategies, and look at how they can be able to reinforce, their support base at every level, whether at the grassroots, in the urban centers, whether geographically, otherwise.
Okay, Richard, let me just get a final word from you. I mean, and I want you to speak to the dangers that, pollings like this could pose, especially in a democracy that is still evolving.
The reportage, there is nothing wrong with pre-election polls.
But how it's reported.
But this one is wrongly reported and can create negative impression in the minds of supporters, for instance. In a situation whereby you have 60% of the people sampled saying, I will not tell you, or I have not decided, you report surveys from the angle of significance. And at the same, that's why this poll should have been reported from that angle. That would have prepared the minds of the supporters that, look, 60% of the people have not said who they will vote for.
From what you're saying here, I mean, it's clear that the devil is in the detail
here. It's in the details.
For most people, they actually did not look at the detail of this report.
That is it. Let them know that 60% you report survey from the angle of significance. That is, in this poll, if we look at the result, the angle of significance is the fact that 60% of your respondents did not tell you who they will vote for. So it could go either way. So that is where you report it from. If this poll had been reported from that angle, that is Anand poll now, that would have prepared the minds of the supporters that, look, we cannot rely on this yet. Our guy just had 19%. How can you, and you have other 60% of the people that have not stated who they will vote for. So that would have prepared their mind. By not doing so, you have created impression that, for instance, that Peter Obi will win this poll, which is wrong. That is not what the poll conducted by ANAP is also saying. We are not even going to any other poll. We are saying this one, the data we are saying, that is what ANAP reported, is not the case with its own data, its own 40 data collected through 40 means. What you need to do is to report it from the fact that 60% of the people. Now, you would have prepared the minds of the supporters and their political parties that, look, let us know why. You would have urged them, go deep, go and look at why these people are not telling us who do we vote for. Is there a way we can extract this information from them to know where they are going? That's 60%. Anybody at all, regardless, it could have gone to Kwakwanso, and then Kwakwanso will win the Southwest. So what you are saying, wrongly collected data is being wrongly reported, and it is creating wrong impression. So pre-election survey is good, fantastic, if it is properly conducted.
All right. All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for speaking so eloquently on this topic. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much. All right, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll switch topic. We'll be discussing something else. Stay with us, don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, and use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.